Earlier, I spoke to Carsten Brzeski, the global head of macro research and chief economist at ING Germany, and asked if the EU's response will help matters.
I think this is the right way to move along. It is better than going for an imminent escalation. I think the European Union had made clear before that it is willing to make a deal. The European Union had offered quite a lot to purchase, for example, LNG and soybeans. The EU had even gone so far in saying that they would be willing to slash tariffs to zero.
What other tools do you think the EU has at its disposal to get a deal over the line?
Yeah, well, I think many diplomatic skills behind closed doors. That is one. The other one would be really to threaten. I think that is not what the EU is willing to do right now. But don't forget, there is already a retaliation package on the table. Only it was delayed, and it would now become effective, I think, mid-June. So I think that is still something that the EU could use. The EU could also make very clear that it is willing to retaliate further, that it's also willing to actually go for higher tariffs. And the ultimate retaliation measure by the European Union would be if they were to include services, because the EU exports more goods to the US than it imports from the US. But when it comes to services, the EU is clearly importing much more from the US than it exports to the US.
How damaging would higher tariffs be for Europe and indeed the United States if a deal is not secured?
If we really were to see these 50% US tariffs on European goods, that would be pretty damaging for the European economy, but also for the US economy. Well, to give you some numbers, 50% tariffs would mean that the Eurozone economy would grow by something like 0.6 percentage points less than normally. Well, we are expecting the Eurozone to grow by 0.7% this year, so it makes sure that these 50% tariffs would push the European economy close to stagnation. In the US, however, these tariffs would clearly be stagflationary, so they would lead to surging inflation, as it is US consumers paying the price for it, and at the same time, followed by higher inflation, US economic activity would also slow down.
In reality, do you think that the White House could try to negotiate individually with countries in Europe, as some people close to the Trump administration have suggested?
That is what the Trump administration had always hoped for. It is actually not possible, at least not really out in the open, because in Europe, it is the European Commission that is really responsible for all these kind of trade agreements. Of course, behind the scenes, there might be some bilateral talks, but I think that is very unique as well currently, that the Europeans have really come up with a very close frontier towards the US. So the Europeans have really spoken with one voice here, and they have not really been played against each other. So I think it will be extremely hard for the US administration to really try to break up or to open up a very close, harmonious European front line.